speech you give to us, I may still wonder in the way you talk about the nation of the Jew or the race of the Jew and how you want to handle or how you want to run your ideal state. What's different between your idea and the fascist idea, or worse one, let's put it, since you came from, well, actually you're not from Middle East, but you claim you are from that. Anyhow, since I'm from there is one thing we have in common. We both came from the birth of all religions. And that's the problem right now is existing in Middle East. If you want to run your state based off the religious, what's the definition, or what's the difference between you and, in other hand, Hitler on the base of the fascism, or Khomeini on base of the Islam? Why are you not thinking about all the human is equal and they have a right to live next to each other regardless of their belief or religious?
First of all,
one more comment. Well, I'm from Iran.
From where?
Iran.
And Jewish, right?
Yes, I born in the Jewish family, but I don't consider myself as a religious person.
Yeah, right.
I'm from the country, the great Cyrus, if you remember, during the ancient time, released all the Jew. I mean, and I kind of amazed why you right away when I opposed to the way you're talking, you said, you Arab. Well, yes, right now I said I'm Arab. What's the make different? I'm just questioning you in terms of the way you're talking to people. You're assaulting everybody. It does. If I was blonde or blue eye, you're going to change your behavior?
That's it?
Yeah.
But that's it, right?
Well, did you got my question?
Is that all?
Did you got my question?
I got all your questions. Is that all?
Okay. Yeah.
Good. Concerning the arrest, I'll put in a good word for the poor kid. But it was a pleasure to see him arrested. Now, why can't Jews live side by side with Arabs? That's your really basic question after that long speech. That's exactly what I want. I want to move the Arabs out of my country and let them live in their country called Jordan, and I'll live side by side with them.
That's not
That's
my question.
Exactly what I want.
That's not my question.
That is my answer to your...
Why you don't want people live next to each other regardless of their...
I asked you twice.
Wait a minute. When you were speaking, you didn't let me talk. And now it's my turn.
Not even a second. I asked you before, were you finished? And you said yes. I asked that for a reason,
and
knowing
I
that...
emphasized that you got my question or no. You're changing my question.
Sir,
that's not my question.
I heard the question. I answered the question the way I answered the question. If you're not happy,
you have a right to
I'll give you a free
question.
ticket to the Wailing Wall. The fact of the matter is, I heard the question. I'll answer the question the way I answer it. If you don't like it, the next turn around, ask me it again. I am ready to allow the Palestinians... What do you mean, me? If the Palestinians want to call Jordan Palestine, who am I to say no? If they want to call it St. Paul, who am I to say no? If they want to call it Disneyland, who am I to say no? But there's never going to be a Palestine in the land of Israel, and get that straight. You had a chance 1,000 times over. You had your chance, and you didn't want a Palestine. You wanted everything. Well, when you start a war and you lose, I come from Brooklyn, and in the streets, losers lose and winners win, and get that clear. Of course you didn't start the war. Sweden did, yes, sir. The question of, I can't read that. I'm sorry, the last question was what again?
Well, if you let me make a comment, I was telling you, you changed my question.
No.
No, I asked you why you don't think about human beings as a human being regardless of their religious or belief. I don't want to get to the point who is Jew or who's Muslim, Arab, or anything else. That's not the question.
Yeah.
That's not the human life in 20th century.
right.
We're not talking about ancient time.
Absolutely.
Okay, then why you start to talk about I want Arab to live by Arab?
It's a pleasure to hear you suddenly talking about peace. How come we didn't hear that from you in 1947?
1947.
In 1966?
Great.
1967?
1947, Moshe
No,
Dayan.
it was a rhetorical question. It was
No,
rhetorical.
just a second.
It was
Why
a
I wanna-
rhetorical question.
Great. I want to tell you why you didn't heard about in 1974. That was the time Moshe Dayan took the cabinet, and the first speech he gave the story about Jewish family, and the story goes something like that. It was an old farmer man living in his old home. Just a second. You start to talk about all those history. I wanted to say one present time. Just listen. And he said, well, he had a goat in his house, and he was putting it outside in the yard. That goat was making noise during the night, and he couldn't get a sleep. Day after, that farmer take a goat to this person like him as a rabbi and told him, well, I have this goat in making noise, and I couldn't get a sleep. What should I do? Then the rabbi suggested him, well, tonight take the goat in your room. He did that thing. That night, now the noise was louder and the smell got worse and worse. He saw the problem, it didn't been solved. He went back again to rabbi and told him the story. Then he said, well, take it back in the first place. He did that thing. And day after he came and appreciated the suggestion of the rabbi. Moshe Dayan started with this story and then said, well, we're going to occupy, say, 100 miles, and the Arab going to be against us, and then we'll release 50 miles. I mean, that was your idea in 1974. Why you accept anybody to talk about the peace? You said the way American or in this country people solve the problem, they sit in the coffee table and the cake and then solve the problem. That's great. And I agree with that. But since, for example, you are one of the side of the Middle East problem, when you have that attitude about the killing, murdering people, how I can sit and talk to you in the coffee table? There is no way. If those Palestinian teenagers, they had a gun, for sure, they're shooting you. But the only thing they have right now is a stone. And yeah, they're going to throw a stone to you until the problem going to be solved.
We'll take the risk. We'll take the risk.
Well, these people living on
My
risk.
friend, listen. You spoke. Let you speak. There are other people waiting for you. I heard what you said. A change of history. An incredible ability to avoid facts and truths. You didn't start the war in 1948. You're right. We did. You're right. You're right. We did. We agreed to disagree. You started 4 wars with us, and you lost, and that's the way it is. You lost, and we win. And Arabs will not be throwing anything in Israel when I'm prime minister because they won't be there. Next question.
You mentioned South Africa only in relation to Nelson
Yes, sir.
Mandela.
Right.
Now, hundreds of thousands of black Africans have been killed by the government of South Africa. And we have evidence that the government of Israel is conniving with the government of South Africa to oppress black Africans. Now, most black African states have established or have normalized their relations with Israel. Why does Israel still continue to participate in the murdering of black Africans?
That's it. In 1973, when Egypt attacked Israel on its holiest day, Yom Kippur, every black African state in Africa cut its ties with Israel. And South Africa didn't. And I despise South Africa. I despise their policy. But if you think that we're going to back an African National Congress whose leader embraces a man who wants to wipe out Israel, then you're crazy. So that, you're right. Because I would assume that you're not crazy, and therefore I would assume that you know we're not going to back the African National Congress. Why did the black states in 1973 all cut their ties? Why? How come? If you think that we're going to go with people who have shown a bias and hostility in the UN against Israel from 1948, I'm not a fool. We go for our self-interest. The African National Congress took support from communists and from the Soviet Union because they believed that it was to their self-interest. I can of course grasp that. Sir, I haven't finished yet.
That was not my question.
So after I finish, you'll speak again. Don't worry, let you speak. So therefore, if in 1959, when the Algerians were fighting the French, and there's no question that the French were wrong, imperialists, should Israel have backed the Algerians, knowing that if they won, there'll be one more Arab state against Israel? Of course not. I'm not crazy. I despise the government in South Africa. But I'm certainly not going to back anybody who has committed himself to my enemies who would wipe us out. And if that doesn't make you happy, well, it makes me less happy to see Mandela embrace Arafat.
Please, let me rephrase my question. How does the security of Israel, how can Israel survive with the apartheid system? That's what I don't understand. Why? Why does Israel connive with South Africa to maintain the apartheid system?
First of all, Israel opposes it. Israel has cut trade with them. Israel has cut the arms with them. Had I been there, I would not have done it. You hear me? Not because I like them. I don't like them. But I do what's good for my country, just as you do what's good for your country. So don't be so righteous here. You are taking oil from Arab states who are the leaders in the slave trade of blacks today in the world today. Doesn't that bother you?
Oh, yeah, it does bother me, but I'm talking of the present. What is going on right now?
The fact is, it didn't bother the ANC. It didn't bother them. Because what was good for the ANC, and I understand them. I understand them. They did what was best for them. And so they went into a bed with slave traders because at that moment, it was good for the ANC. Well, we learned a great, great lesson. The whole world has been against us for 2,000 years. And we're going to do what's good for us and not what is good for you if that's bad for us.
Well, you still didn't answer my question. Thank you, though.
Yeah.
Yes. What I wanted to know, the couple questions that come up. One thing is what struck me as very interesting is you comparing the Middle West with the Middle East. And what I want to know is what's wrong with sitting over a cup of coffee and discussing problems, and what's wrong with compromise? And don't you think that, or I would think that compromise is not only it's practical, but it also seems to me it's a spiritual or ethical. I mean, isn't God in favor of compromise? And the last thing is I've heard Farrakhan speak, and he reminds me a lot of you. And it's good. I'm glad you spoke out against him and Carmichael and Jackson, and I hope they would speak out against you too, because it seems like you're both on extremist sides. And why does power or feeling? I mean, I'm Jewish, okay, and we've been.
I know.
Right. Oh, right. And it just seems that to be strong and committed to me as a person, us as a people, doesn't have to mean to be not non-compromising and just so rigid. I don't think there is strength in being rigid. I think it's weak.
Okay. There's nothing wrong with sitting down over coffee and cake with people that you can sit down with. How come they didn't sit down over coffee and cake with us for 40 years when they thought that they could kill us and win a war? How come? Because when they think that they can win, there's no coffee and cake. When they think that they can't win,